If you wait for head office to tell you what to do, it's already too late. The fact that you have 200, 300 applicants for every government job itself tells you that the terms of the government job are completely disconnected from the market.
You really go deep into this as part of the book. Two things that I found very interesting in terms of insights that you present, and would love for you to share those. One is the fact that you shared that India is a really understaffed bureaucracy. Unlike popular perception, where you believe the bureaucracy is kind of really big, and that sometimes those comments come just by looking at the top, the number of ministries, the number of departments, but really when it comes to middle management, which is, let's say, the district level, or the frontline workers, which are really interfacing with the citizen on a day-to-day basis, your school teachers, your Anganwadi workers, healthcare workers, police personnel. You look at it holistically, the entire pyramid, then it's really, really understaffed, right? So that's something I wanted to talk about with kind of comparisons with data and so on.
So like you said, this is something that most people think of the Indian state as this bloated, inefficient entity. And in some ways that might be true because it has presence in places where it need not be. Okay. So, and often kind of acts as an impediment. But when it comes to its capacity to impede is very high, but its capacity to serve is very low. Okay. And so when it comes to the frontline service functions, that's where you're massively understaffed. Okay. Now, there are many reasons for this, but one key reason, which again, most people don't realize, is that Indian government employees are actually among the most overpaid in the world. Okay, if you look at this compared to both private sector as well as compared to GDP, the ratio of salaries to GDP. Okay, so simple example I'll give you. P in education. Okay, so everybody says to get better education outcomes, you have to increase education spending. But China and Vietnam have delivered better education outcomes, spending less than India. Okay, and the key is that in fact, salaries are actually much lower and there is much greater accountability and there is more staffing. Okay, so the core problem of the Indian state is that we pay too much and we hire too few. Okay, and you can see the consequences of this even in the structure of labor markets, because it is not just something that affects the state capacity. The fact that you have 200, 300 applicants for every government job itself tells you that the terms of the government job are completely disconnected from the market. And that in turn has implications for skilling and employment, which we can come back and talk about. But the core challenge is this, right? So P, you don't have enough staff. But then the ones you have, it's not that there is not accountability. There is accountability, but the accountability is all for compliance and process and not for outcomes. Okay. So there's a core principle of effective organizations and organization management that says you provide autonomy to the frontline worker on process, because the frontline person is the one who's close to the problem and knows how to fix. So if you wait for head office to tell you what to do, it's already too late. Okay, so you need to empower the frontline person to solve the problem, but with accountability for the outcomes. Whereas in government, we do exactly the opposite. You micromanage on process so that there's very little autonomy, but there is no accountability for outcome. So one of the favorite examples of this I like to give, because people understand from popular culture, right? So my own work on education technology, right, where we say that even if you sanction the budget for computers and schools have computer labs, you'll often go to the labs and see that the lab is locked and the chabi is the headmaster. Okay. Now, why is that? It's because nobody is holding the headmaster accountable for whether the children are learning. Okay. But if other computer kahin se chori ho gayi, to aapki band baj gayi, right? Like it means, so your incentives are to make sure ki ye computer chori nahi ho raha. Right? So that's where you then have to think through the incentives of each actor, right? I mean, as a policy goes from policy down the ground. So, and you see this in Panchayat, right? So there's this whole episode called Computer Nahi Monitor, right? Like, I mean, where basically nobody cared computer use ho raha hai nahi. Like, wo monitor chori ho gayi, so this is entire episode where you see the trouble he's going through, right? So the point I put about the bureaucracy is that we are understaffed. It's not managed effectively. The staff don't have the autonomy or the empowerment to deliver. And it also, the managers, even if you have, so first of all, at the managerial level, there are massive vacancies. Okay.
Yeah.
So
can you share some statistics in terms of comparative also? And
so so in terms of the headcount numbers, so, sorry, I missed that, right? So India, and again, this is slightly outdated, it's maybe 7-8 years old, but when the last time comparable data was available, India had about 16 employees per 1,000 citizens compared to about 159 in Norway, right? So we're 1/10 the staffing of kind of Scandinavian countries. Now, those are high income welfare states. But even compared to the US, it's about 1/5. The US, there was about 77. Compared to China, it's about 1/3, which is about 57, right? So we are dramatically understaffed at the frontline level, but also we are understaffed at the managerial level, which is further complicates the efficiency of the utilization of your existing staff. So in one of my papers on teacher absence, right? So one very, very robust finding is that schools that have been regularly visited by a supervising officer tend to have much lower absence. But if you don't have the supervisor position filled, you're not going to have those visits, right? So they estimate that the return on investment of filling a supervisory position is actually 10 times higher than filling a frontline position because of the leverage that you get from better management.
Yeah, I can also kind of second that through the practical experience that we have. Every state, any department that we work in, there's 30% vacancies kind of is not at all. It's very, very common, right? It's very common, be it at the supervisory level, be it at the block officer level, the district officer level, and people have dual charges and so on and so forth, which makes it very, very complicated to deliver.